women who get together with other women are healthier, happier, and stronger.
Now we can make some figure eights with our hips. Figure eight, figure eight, figure eight, figure eight. Woo!
By the time I met Mickey, I had already contemplated suicide and I was developing a plan. That's how dark my life had gotten.
Because I'm a woman, phenomenal woman, that's me.
Welcome to Prime Time for Women, the show for and about women in their prime. Normally on this show, we celebrate amazing women who in the second half of life successfully take on new challenges and have tons of fun doing so. But nothing is normal about these unprecedented times. Our community, our country, and our world have been changed forever by the COVID-19 pandemic and the death of George Floyd. It would be wrong on so many levels not to acknowledge the impact of these important events on our lives and our culture. Yet, as women in our prime, even during these difficult times, we've been taking on new challenges, and we just never thought they would involve distancing ourselves from our family and friends and neighbors and coworkers in the midst of a pandemic, or protesting the tragic death of an unarmed Black man. Living through these extraordinary times makes me incredibly grateful to have the chance to be with you, to tell you that you're not alone, that I care, that we will get through this together. In accordance with Governor Hogan's Phase 2 reopening plan, our show is going to have a different format. Instead of a show before a live audience or a group of diverse women sitting at a panel discussion, we are going to be having the opportunity to do in-depth interviews with two guests, two women who in the midst of this global upheaval managed in very different ways to show the fortitude and commitment of women in their prime. Our first guest, Melanie Houston, is Vice President and Chief Nursing and Patient Care Services Officer at Meritus Health. Melanie has both a master's and a doctorate degree from University of Pittsburgh and successfully held many leadership positions in hospitals in Pennsylvania and Maryland. During today's show, Melanie will pay tribute to the women and men who have cared for our community during the pandemic, and also we'll get to talk with her about an exciting milestone, the first anniversary of Meritus Health's highly coveted Magnet Award. This is an unprecedented accomplishment. Only 8% of all hospitals receive this recognition. Since we could all use some good news, it's my pleasure to welcome Melanie to today's show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. It's so great to have you here. Melanie, let's just start off by, first of all, thanking you and all the other employees at Meritus for their care during this crazy time. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the medical people behind the scenes and the medical staff that make it possible to provide care during the COVID pandemic.
Well, you have to remember Meritus Medical Center and Meritus Health in general have 2,900 employees.
Wow.
Right, so that's a lot of employees in this region and 700 nurses.
Wow.
So this took a village.
Right.
This took, first of all, I've been a nurse for a very long time. I've never lived through a pandemic. Mm-hmm. And so we had to figure this out, quickly,
right,
and on our feet in a very nimble way. And so this took many of us. This was everyone.
It was a real collaborative effort, right? From everybody across the board, nurses, doctors, housekeeping, dietitians, everybody, right?
It's people you wouldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
We started a command center almost immediately, and we worked with our county, and we developed a 24-hour round-the-clock command center so we can mobilize things quickly because a pandemic is an emergency,
right,
and it's something you've never done before. So this was everybody you could think of.
That's great. Well, I really appreciate that. Melanie, maybe you could tell us from your perspective, what was some of the greatest challenges that the nurses experienced during this time?
So, normally it's fear, mm-hmm, right? And so what we tried to do to calm the fear, because none of us have been through this.
Right.
And we were all learning something day by day, minute by minute. As you were following the media, it was changing. And so having enough PPE, as everyone has heard now what PPE is, protective gear for right, staff, was paramount. And securing enough PPE was critical. And so our command center, which was comprised of people from IT, from pharmacy, leading the charge, was there to first say, how do we keep our patients safe and our nurses safe? And so that was like the first priority.
Right. Right. And did the nurses, because of the pandemic, did their roles change at all? Did they take on any new roles that they hadn't done in the past?
So one of the things we're very proud of at Meredith is we did have a plan where we guaranteed everyone work, because during the pandemic, many things slowed down. Like, as you probably know, we stopped doing elective surgeries. We only did emergency operations. And so the nurses some nurses were really, really busy, like in our intensive care unit, in our ER.
Right.
And even though our ER saw fewer patients, we had to make sure that we were doing the right things to protect everyone.
Because not everybody stops getting sick just because there's a COVID pandemic, right?
You still have heart attacks. You
Right.
still have strokes coming in, but you've got to protect them. And so then there were nurses, there were PTs, there was OTs, there was everybody chipping in and saying, what can we do? And so we utilized all the resources. We guaranteed everyone their salary as long as they were chipping in and helping us all take care of the patients.
That's great. And you told me that there was one thing that the nurses did that they'd never done before, and that was because patients couldn't have family members come into the hospital. Could you talk about that just a little bit?
That is still the part that's very, very hard, because we still are not allowing visitors.
Okay.
And of course we want people.
And that's for their protection, right?
I was just going to say, that is, this is 100% for their protection. There's a couple reasons. One is we still don't have enough PPE to open the doors.
Right.
Because we have students, we have volunteers who are so important to us, and our patients' families, but it's also to protect them. And so the nurses were immediately thrown into a role of how do they communicate with the family that would normally be at the bedside. And then many times they had to be substitute family members because the patients are very isolated and alone, and it was really difficult for the nurses to watch, and they developed a solidarity amongst each other of how they take care of each other during that time.
That's great. That's great. So they're taking care of each other, and they're also playing family and support
Right.
to the patients. Well, I cannot wait for you to hear Melanie talk about the Meredith Magnet Award. But we're going to take a short break and come back and hear that great news in just a minute. We'll be right back.
I was afraid, I was in pain, and I was on medications. I didn't want to be just another number. I wanted to be somewhere not far from my family, and somewhere that I knew I had the right doctor. The staff was simply wonderful. The manner, the professionalism, the protocol, it's 100%.
Access to high-speed internet is critical for school-aged children. Since 2014, Antietam Broadband and Washington County Public Schools have partnered to connect students and families in need with low-cost, high-speed internet service at home. Every child deserves an opportunity to succeed. Ask your child's teacher for more information on the Antietam EduNet program. A message from Washington County Public Schools and Antietam Broadband.
The DVR. It's changed the way we watch TV. And now, Antietam Broadband takes you to the next level with TiVo. Find your favorites on cable or streaming video faster with voice-activated integrated search. Record up to 6 channels at once and watch from any TV in your home. TiVo from Antietam Broadband. It will change your life. Call today or visit AntietamBroadband.com to learn more.
You know the difference between a minor fall and a major fall. But do you know where to go when they occur? If you are having an urgent but non-emergency healthcare problem like a minor fall, flu symptoms, or sinus infection, visit our urgent care center. We are open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day. For a major fall and other critical or complex medical matters, you should come right into our emergency department. Now you know where to go.
Welcome back. I'm glad you're still with me, and Melanie Houston from Meredith Health Hospital. Melanie, right before the break, we were talking about the COVID pandemic, but I want to switch gears and really celebrate this Magnet Award that Meredith received. It's the 1-year anniversary of the Magnet Award, something only 8% of hospitals receive. Can you tell us what it is and what it means to the Meredith Health community?
What it means to Meredith Health community is that Meredith Health reached a set of standards that were both a written document and a visit of a site review to verify what is written, that we have high standards for nursing practice. And it isn't just the nurses, and I think that's a couple points I think that are really important. This is a team, and although it is a nursing award, it is about a team because it cannot be just the nurses. And so it means that we are in an elite club. Right, which I'm very proud of, and I believe it as a standard and a roadmap. If you want excellence in your hospital, you will follow the Magnet standards, and so I feel very honored and privileged.
Oh, that's great. And the Magnet hospital designation takes a lot of time and involves a lot of people. Can you talk about who was involved? I know you had community members involved and all kinds of people, so it was a big deal. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I've been at Meritus Health for 3 years, and I would tell you that they had been working on Magnet for many years.
Right.
The journey from people when they start to when they get is about 5 or 6 years. Quite candidly, I wouldn't have come here if there was not a commitment to Meritus Magnet, because that means that nurses are important.
Right.
They have a voice, and that the organization is committed to the nurses. What it means also for the community to know is the nursing outcomes for patients exceed the national benchmarks, and that is information that you have to document and show.
Exceeds, doesn't meet,
Right.
exceeds the national
Meet or
benchmark.
exceeds in the majority of the units. And so certain things that are nursing outcomes would be falls with injury. You never want a patient to fall when they come into the hospital, but it is a nursing outcome to make sure that they have the security they need, they have an observer that they need, the nurses get the orders from the physician, that they're in a low bed. Many things, those are nursing measures, and they're empowered to make sure that the patients get the care.
So it's a lot of empowering the nurses to provide the best care possible,
And
right?
to speak up.
And to speak up when they
And
need
ask
it.
for what they need.
That's great.
And that I'm the voice of the translator to people that they might need new equipment or different staffing.
Well, Melanie, I'm so glad that you're here today, and I wanted to thank you for telling us about Magnet Award. But knowing how busy you are, I'd also like to thank you for taking time to be here, but I want to go to something else now.
Okay.
I just learned that yesterday you received a national award from the ANCC, which is the American Nursing Certification Center.
Correct.
And this is an incredible award that celebrates you as an empowered leader, a transformational leader was the wording that they used, and particularly in decreasing workplace violence, right?
Correct.
So I'm so excited that you're here and we get to recognize you, and I was wondering if you could say just a few words about this national award.
Well, I'm honored and shocked because they do pick one nurse who is certified in administration, and I encourage nurses to be certified, and I'm a certified administrator. The work we did in reducing workplace violence also took a village, and the work we did for Magnet took a village, and so I'm honored, but I want the message to be that you can be a nurse at Meritus Hospital in Hagerstown and be a nationally recognized leader because we are special and we have something very important to offer here. So I'm honored, but I also wanted to be a role model to all other people at Meritus that we really are doing things that matter.
Well, I'm so grateful that you're here, and I wanted to give you, on behalf of Prime Time for Women, I wish this wasn't COVID-19 because I would give you a big hug.
I know.
But congratulations, and thank you so much for your work for our community. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this short commercial break.
I was afraid, I was in pain, and I was on medications. I didn't want to be just another number. I wanted to be somewhere not far from my family, and somewhere that I knew I had the right doctor. The staff was simply wonderful. The manner, the professionalism, the protocol, it's 100%.
The DVR, it's changed the way we watch TV. And now, Antietam Broadband takes you to the next level with TiVo. Find your favorites on cable or streaming video faster with voice-activated integrated search. Record up to 6 channels at once and watch from any TV in your home. TiVo from Antietam Broadband. It will change your life. Call today or visit AntietamBroadband.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Prime Time for Women. As I mentioned during our opening of today's show, We are living in unprecedented times. It's impossible to overemphasize this point. I invited our next guest, Stacey Turner, to speak honestly and openly about the impact George Floyd's tragic death has had on her, on our community, and on our world. Stacey, who is a senior business analyst at Fiserv, formerly First Data, has been with the company for 20 years, and along with her husband is raising 3 amazing daughters. As a woman who says her most important roles are wife, mother, daughter, and sister, Stacey believes that healthy family relationships are based on love, understanding, and acceptance. And of course, these same qualities are necessary for healthy race relationships. But according to Stacey, first, deep listening is required. It's not possible for us to understand or accept what we have not truly heard and processed. She is ever the optimist, and her favorite quote comes from Nelson Mandela, who said, quote, "May your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears." Stacey, thanks for being with us here today and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So in preparation of this, for this interview, we had a phone conversation. And during that phone conversation, you said, there's a lot happening on top of a lot. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, at the time, that was just really resonated with me. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you can talk about how all these different things have come together to make this such an extraordinary time.
Certainly. I think when I made mention to a lot happening, nobody foreseen this coming, right? We're in a time where the entire world, there's not a place within the world that is not being impacted by COVID, yet our daily is still going on. You know, for me, I took a time and I listened to my girls and my husband, and more than what they're saying, I pay attention to what they're not saying. You know, and I think that it's very important that we are mindful of what we know versus what we feel. And that's something that mm-hmm. I had to learn now 3 months in. Right. And at the onset of everything, I was anxious, and not so much for myself, but for everybody else, and making sure that are you really okay? But it's unprecedented, as you said at the top of the show.
Yeah, and just because we've never been through this before, I love that you're saying I'm listening to not only what's being said, but what's not being said. Mm-hmm. And part of that is fear, mm-hmm. and that plays it out in a lot of different ways in a lot of people's lives. Mm-hmm. I was wondering, as we process the tragic death of George Floyd, there have been protests across the country and in our own community. Do you think these protests are evidence that people are finally understanding that it wasn't an isolated incident and maybe there's some systemic issues that we have to change? Or what is your thought on why that part has been such an impact in our community?
Yes and no. My first response was no. I think that COVID made everybody sit still and pay attention.
Okay.
And I think that we have a generation that's coming up that has had these conversations literally all of their lives. And they've also been spoken into their lives to tell them that anything is possible, and they're finally taking heed to that. Mm-hmm. So using that as a combination, I think that they're the ones that are leading the pack.
Right.
You know, and I would like to have that optimistic view and say that, you know, people are realizing that this is systemic. But if it had not been for COVID, unfortunately, this may have just been another black man that unfortunately lost his life at the hands of police brutality. So I think that this happened at a time where the world is shifting and we're at a standstill. And you had no choice but to listen.
That's really interesting. I hadn't even really connected that we were staying at home. We could mm-hmm. hear it, we could watch it, we could really process it. So mm-hmm. that's really a great point. I was wondering, do you have a personal story of participating in the protest that really was instructive to you that you could pass on to the rest of us?
Certainly, and I want to start by saying thank you. You know, as a black woman, sometimes we find ourselves often in a role of being support, but not often supported. And when you pose that question, I think of our oldest daughter. She just finished her junior year in college. This fall, she will be the president of the Black Student Union at her school, and she's a dual major. She's peace and conflict studies and sustainability. So right now, in essence, right, this would be
she's getting graduate degree.
Right? This would be her time. And I was on my way to a sit-in, and I asked her if she wanted to go with me, and she started to cry. And I came to her, and of course, as a mom, I just hugged her, and I'm like, what's the matter? And, she said, I just feel like I'm supposed to because of everything that I just rattled off. But internally, my world is turned upside down. For her, spring break, she was supposed to be in Florida. This summer, she was supposed to be doing an internship in New York. Everything about her world is turned upside down. And I reminded her, and I said, and I call her Pumpkin, that's her nickname. So I said, Pumpkin, what we forget sometimes as Black women is that the battlefield first starts here. This is the first battlefield. And the fact that you said, I have to pause, you're already on the front line. That's a movement all on its own for you to say, I need to recognize that mentally, I need to pause. And I need to gather myself, and that's okay. That in itself is a movement.
Right, right. And so for you, when you were at the protests, was there a lesson that you took from the crowds, or was there something meaningful that you could share with us that would speak into our lives?
It was worship, and I love to worship. It was collective worship. There was white, there was Black, there was everything in between, and it was collective worship. There was no hatred, there was no spewing. People were driving by and honking their horns in solidarity, but it was pure worship.
So you said to me that your superpower is encouragement, right? And I can see that right now.
Thank you.
What do you do? How do you use encouragement for yourself and for others in your support of racial equality and working for justice?
I think for me, it's reminding myself of, again, what I know versus what I feel. I know that God is who He says He is, always, even in the midst of COVID, and even in the midst of the tragedy of Mr. Floyd. And it's also, it's an encouraging word. It may be a song. It may be something that I post on social media. It may just be a handshake, or I want to say an embrace, but perhaps not an embrace right at this moment.
Right.
But it's having these conversations,
right,
unfiltered and transparent.
So where do we go from here? How do we move forward? What are the healing steps that we need to take to heal this racial divide? What are some practical things that we can do?
I think you said it in your question. You said heal. And I think the first thing that we have to do is learn how to heal. As a mother, there's times where your child, your son or your daughter will cry. And by that particular cry, like, he or she, they're okay. Come here. But you keep doing whatever it is that you're doing. And then there's a cry where you drop whatever you're doing and you go to them. And I think right now, the cry of the Black and brown community is the latter. And I think learning how to heal, the H starts with being humble. It's putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. The E is giving ears to hear and a heart to listen. The A is recognizing that we're all in this together, and L is to lead with love. And if you ask me, Stacey, how do we do that? We lean out onto our own understanding.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that heal. And we're going to stop right there, take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back and hear more from Stacey. Thanks for being with us. We'll be right back.
We would like to thank you for complying with the governor's orders and helping us to help you in these difficult times. Our volunteers are here for you.
Thank you to all of our Washington County first responders for keeping us safe during the pandemic. Also, a huge thank you to our parents, our students, and our teachers for maintaining distance learning during this outage.
We're working together to help you.
You know the difference between a minor fall and a major fall. But do you know where to go when they occur? If you are having an urgent but non-emergency healthcare problem like a minor fall, flu symptoms, or sinus infection, visit our urgent care center. We are open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day. For a major fall and other critical or complex medical matters, you should come right into our emergency department. Now you know where to go.
Welcome back to Prime Time for Women with Stacey Turner here today. Stacey, I've been doing a lot of reading and trying to learn how I can best support the healing work of Healing the Racial Divide. And I was wondering if you could speak to the importance of humility and empathy as tools of fighting racism and injustice.
Absolutely. I think that both of them have to be partnered together. Humble says, I don't know, but if I was in your shoes. And to me, empathy says, I may not understand your pain, but I recognize pain. So when you join those two together, then you're saying, I may not understand because I'm not, you know, a black woman, but I know what pain is.
Right.
And I recognize that when Mr. Floyd was calling out for his mother, that was pain. And I recognize that.
And we're not going to really move forward unless we can all share that throughout the whole human family.
Absolutely.
Right, right. So I know you're part of a wonderful nonprofit, Women Who Uplift. I see it on your shirt, founded by Daphne Smith Jackson. And they just did a celebration this past weekend to lots of different things. I was wondering if you could talk about the 3 events they held this past weekend and maybe some of the future events to look forward to.
Certainly, certainly. So this weekend, and Women Who Uplift is a collective group of women that Daphne brought together that inspired her. There were different attributes that each woman brought to the table, and it's just coming together and loving on other women and the community as a whole. On Friday, it was about honoring the graduates and giving them ices. On Saturday, it was handing out bag lunches that were put together by Applause Catering for the essential workers. And then on Sunday, it was just loving on the community from Whedon Park. There were sandwiches that were donated by Jersey Mike's and Rita's Ice, and it was just a good time.
That's great. And there's a big empowerment conference coming up next May 2021.
Yes.
Can you talk about who is the, I know we already have a speaker, and
Yes.
a little bit about that event?
Certainly, we're very excited. We're going to be partnering with the Maryland, and our keynote is none other than Lisa Leslie. She is a WNBA player, 4-time gold medalist consecutive. And we're looking forward to it. It's just lavishing love, again, on the women in our community and recognizing the importance of putting us first. And sometimes that's so uncomfortable, but it really is that. Leading up to the event, we have some other items going on. We're going to be collecting prom dresses. We're going to do a teach tech, so think of it as a granddaughter teaching her grandmother how to use Facebook, for example, and also a resume building. So all of these things will be leading up to our main event.
A huge part of Women Who Uplift is this idea that you're providing mentorship to empower those young girls to step into their fullness, right?
Absolutely.
I'm so excited about that, and I really, really appreciate it. So I mentioned that I've been doing a lot of reading and listening lately, and in the process I've come up with a greater understanding of the work that I must do better in order to be a part and support the healing that needs to occur in our community. And I found a reading that I was hoping you would read with me as a way of kind of codifying our intent, my intent to be support in this fight for justice and equality.
Absolutely.
This is written by Dr. Niemiec and appeared on the viacharacter.org website, and my gratitude to him.
Listen to protesters. Listen to black leaders. Close your eyes and really listen. Then
return to humility.
Empathize and try to feel what others are feeling.
Then return to humility.
Try to deeply understand the other person's experience.
Return to humility.
Stand up for what's right.
Return to humility.
Speak against injustice and deep-seated unfairness.
Then return to humility.
Elevate the voices of the disenfranchised, the quiet ones, the invisible ones.
Return to humility.
Gain new perspectives, understandings, and insight about others.
Return to humility.
Try to understand the feelings and the day-to-day mindset of others.
Return to humility.
We are all equal. We are all one family.
Thank you, Stacy. I really appreciate you doing that. I'd like to thank Stacy for being on our show today and for speaking her truth and encouraging all of us to be our best selves. Her optimism and hope are infectious, and these are things I hope we all catch. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Prime Time for Women.